Hello, my name is Carrie Howard, and this is my video journal number 1 for EDU 575. In this video journal, I'm going to be discussing the behavior characteristics in autism spectrum disorder and also some things I've seen in my observations and experience. I'm going to share my screen, see if this works. So here are some of my observations on the behavior characteristics in autism spectrum disorders. In order to be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, the DSM-5 lays out that students must have deficits in particular areas, including their social communication and interaction, with varying levels of severity or intensity over a period of time and developmental stages of their life. And also include at least 2 restrictive and repetitive behaviors. So we're going to be discussing this in some of my experience with this. So first, the deficits in the social communication and interaction of students with autism. They often have difficulty interacting with other people appropriately. So I think there is a bit of a misconception that students with autism don't interact with others, but they do, but it's often limited, and sometimes it's not appropriate or it's one-sided in my experience. They may not engage in reciprocal play activities, such as turn-taking games or other activities. They may lack eye contact or avoid eye contact. They often can't understand the emotions of others or themselves, and that includes being able to identify facial expressions or tone of voice in others, and they can misinterpret social cues. They might prefer to only talk on their particular areas of interest. An example of this is one time, and this is one of my observations, I had a student with autism who is a middle schooler, and he absolutely loved Thomas the Train. And I have to admit, I love Thomas the Train too, but that was all he wanted to talk about. And he had a Thomas the Train backpack. And this student was actually highly intelligent. He got straight A's at in a very rigorous school. But his area of interest being Thomas and seeing that he was an 8th grader middle school student, it really kind of ostracized him from his peers. He had little to no peer friends his age. And part of this is because of that limited ability to connect with others on similar topics. Because most middle schoolers are not interested in Thomas the Train. So this is something that I regularly see in my students with autism, is that they often have a focus of interest. That also goes into some of the repetitive behaviors too, but up here it does affect them in their social interaction. They can also have language delays or speech delays. So they could have difficulty communicating with their words or their pragmatic language. So they may have some very significant deficits in language, but even if they didn't have a significant deficit, you would see potentially they just may not want to talk. So they might not want to interact with others, even if their language is appropriate. So there is a spectrum there. They may also seek out little to no interaction with others. So sometimes students are perfectly content just, not having those interactions, where others might be more social, but it might not be as appropriate as their peers. So now to discuss a little bit the restrictive and repetitive behaviors that students with autism often have in. Again, there's a spectrum here, so you're not going to see, and it's very individualized, you're not going to see all of these behaviors in one student. You might, but the DSM-5 requires at least two. So you'll see maybe some form of these in students. Repetitive body movements such as hand flapping, rocking of their body, maybe repetitive speech patterns. I like to call it movie or TV talk too. So this might be students who like to repeat phrases from movies. Sometimes they're even acting out movies, and that goes into some perseveration on their part. Some of their restricted interests might include movies or characters from cartoons, things like that. They seem, a lot of times students will have a high need for sameness, or the restrictive interests are intense in nature. So yes, you'll see a typical child have an areas of interest, like they love My Little Pony or they love Thomas the Train, for example. But for students with autism, sometimes they present as very restricted, like that's the only thing, and that's always the same thing they want to play with. Maybe they're lining up their toys instead of pretend playing with them. So lining up trains instead of like choo choo and pretend playing with them. So if they are playing with toys, they're playing with them maybe perhaps in an odd way, or a way that may seem odd. They can be hypo or hypersensitive to sensory inputs. So it could be smells can be very overwhelming to them, or lights or sounds. So going into like a crowded area like a cafeteria could be overwhelming to a student and can really cause some problems behaviorally if these are things that are difficult for them. And in the classroom environment, these are things to look out for. So we often see a dysregulation of their sensory processing system, and it's very individualized, so it doesn't present itself the same in every student. I have a student right now who has high level of sensory needs, and it's causing a lot of behavior problems. And he just recently got a one-on-one aide, which is wonderful. And she's able to integrate all these sensory needs for him, such as going for a walk or jumping on the trampoline. He's a student that has to constantly be in motion. His body is very busy, and he has a really hard time calming down his system. So he gets very, he'll be jumping off the chairs and the furniture and running around the room, and has really difficult time calming his body down. He always has to have like a fidget or be drawing on a whiteboard or drawing on paper, because he has very high sensory needs. So that's part of his behavior plan and everything that we're doing with him. And it really does help him to regulate his body when he's getting that sensory input. But his needs might be different from another student's needs, who also has sensory needs. But like, for example, I have a student who likes to smell people's hair, and he puts his nose up really close and inappropriately to other students. And so we have to teach him personal space, and that we can't touch our friends. So we're working on that. So with some of our students, the sensory needs are pretty important to address, because obviously you wouldn't want to be touching other people or smelling people's hair or putting your nose on parts of their body that would not be appropriate. It can cause some real big problems for our students. We'll see ritualized patterns, insistence on sameness, or predictable routines. Like, most children thrive on routines and schedules and stuff, but with our students with autism, we see that any break in their schedule or unexpected thing can just cause a meltdown for them, because that insistence on sameness is so important. And it could be such a problem, such as like if the bus route changes, they're having meltdowns on the bus because, and I'm having a student that has autism in my class right now who they just changed the bus schedules, and they got a new student on the bus. So now instead of being number 5 drop off, he's number 6, and he's just having meltdowns and is really having trouble on the bus because he's having trouble with those routines that he was used to. Difficulty transitioning. So this could be going from the classroom to the cafeteria, or going from mom's car into the school gates. Those can be difficult transitions for some students. Or it could be transitioning from a preferred activity to an unpreferred activity. And those can be difficult. We also can see the restricted behavior related to food patterns where they have highly restricted diet because they only want to eat McDonald's French fries or ice cream for breakfast every day. They don't want to like have more variety in their diet. They might have trouble eating new foods or being introduced to new foods. So these are observations that I've had in the classroom, and in just my experience. So thank you for listening. And that's about all I have right now. Thank you.